Netanyahu's right hand, Netanyahu all the way. We can say what that is all about. Is it about Epstein? Is it about blackmail? Is it about Melania? Is it about this or that? Doesn't matter what it's about. It's working. And Netanyahu maybe it's about money and Miriam Adelson and people like that. Maybe it's about Jack Keynes and others that are behind this whole thing in terms of the real money and influence talking to the people in the Trump administration. I have no idea what it really is, but I have an idea, a very solid idea about how solid this link is between Bibi Netanyahu and what he wants to do vis-a-vis Iran and what we're going to do. And it's extremely dangerous.
There was a statement coming out of Israel yesterday by the Minister of Energy, Eli Cohen. We are not committed to any agreement that doesn't fully guarantee Israel's security. Even if the US and Iran reached an agreement, if Iran acts to renew its nuclear program or advance its ballistic missile program, we will attack.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, and there's only one way they can attack and be effective. And I'm not even sure that way would be effective, but they would certainly set a new parameter for the world, being the second country in the world to use nuclear weapons against other humans.
But then, so is there a possibility that Israel could attack even without American support or the go-ahead from the US if they don't get that, if there's enough pushback in the US? And I'm going to talk about what some generals are telling Trump behind the scenes. If the US decides not to join Israel, could Israel do it anyway?
I don't think so. I mean, the days of 100-plane strikes are extremely limited, if not knocked out completely because of their JP4, JP5, and JP8 shortage. They simply don't have the jet fuel. Second, they don't have the defense mechanisms to take care of what, if they started something, it wouldn't be a nanosecond later that the very best ballistic missiles from Iran, with the most powerful warheads, the most powerful countermeasures, and the fastest speed, think Mach 5 plus, would begin to impact Tel Aviv and Haifa and elsewhere in Israel. So, I mean, you wouldn't even get your planes off the ground probably before the first ballistic missiles began to hit. That's how good Iran's intelligence is. And they have better intelligence now than the Israelis do. I know that sounds funny, but it's partly because the Chinese have given them the capacity to have that. So I don't think that would be feasible. In other words, I don't think a conventional attack on Iran by Israel alone would be feasible. I know it wouldn't be successful.
So then the big question is whether Israel is able to get the US dragged into the war again. And I want to go through some of the. So I want to go through what the CNN is saying. Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. What was that about? Hold on.
You said it right.
There it is. The report.
You said it right. Powell used to tell people all the time, it's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not chief.
Exactly. So the report says Kane believes all the escalatory options available to the US could backfire. He was telling that to Trump. And air power alone is insufficient to defeat Iran. So that's, according to CNN, that's what he's telling Trump. The report that he gave Trump notes that Israel strongly advocated for escalation. Quote, Kane is looking for an off-ramp, one of the sources said bluntly. I think it is just his way of protecting the military, one of the sources told CNN, referring to Kane's discussions with other top national security officials within Trump's cabinet about the Iran war. Trump has consistently appeared averse to the idea of deploying ground troops in Iran, instead signaling he believes the air bombing can force them to agree to a deal on his terms. Kane and others in Trump's cabinet privately view that outcome as unlikely and instead have sought to develop other options that fit within the president's own parameters, according to multiple sources. Quote, the only ones in favor of the operation, which is escalation, were elements of CENTCOM and Israel. So you've got Dan Kane here and other personnel within the military that are against escalation. They're telling Trump air power alone won't work. They're telling him about the depleted munitions, which 2 days ago there was a report that Trump was surprised about it, blamed Hegseth, and Hegseth blamed the person under him, the deputy. So if there's enough pushback there, wouldn't that be enough for Trump to decide not to continue with the war?
You'd think so. And just to defend Dan Kane for a moment, he also, in two hearings that I actually watched, the chairman has, as do most four stars, including the combatant commanders who are called before Congress to testify occasionally too, they have two responsibilities that often conflict, and it's difficult for them to sort them out. One is to the Congress, and the other is to the chief executive. Kane actually said before the Congress on two separate occasions that I witnessed, he said, the history of our air power demonstrates, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm almost quoting, the history of our air power demonstrates that it is not normally decisive, words to that effect. And he said that twice before two different groups. And I think Hegseth was there once and just Kane the other time. So he said that, and I no doubt he said it to the president, because normally a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is not going to say something to the Congress that he hasn't already said to the president or would say to the president. So apparently Trump has gotten that counsel, which worries me as a ground pounder myself, that he is going to try a ground option. If he believes what Kane has told him, then that's the only logical conclusion I can come to, if he also believes he should continue this conflict and that he has a chance of winning it. That he is going to say, okay, he told me air power is not decisive. It's been proven in this case not to be decisive, so I'm going to use ground power. I think that would be a catastrophic decision, and even though I know these people, I've heard them talk about it, don't think the all-volunteer force is anything but expendable. They make comments like, these people volunteered, and they're not the cream of society anyway. They volunteered. Those are comments I have heard from the cognoscenti in this country. So that worries me, and it should worry every ground pounder out there too, Marine or soldier or special operations forces, because they're just going to go into a cauldron of fire that is going to imprison them, kill them, wound them, or worse.
So you think from the advice of Dan Kane, there's two things that Trump would deduct out of this, or deduce out of this. One of them is, I need to off-ramp, I need to walk away from this. Or the second one, air power doesn't work. The only other option is a ground operation. But I'm sure Dan Kane will be telling him, because that report does not talk about recommending a ground operation.
Right.
There is no way Dan Kane would be advocating for that, because that would be worse. You would need sufficient air power and effective long-range missiles to be able to conduct a ground operation, because you need to destroy Iran's ability to fire at the troops. So if air power doesn't work and the munitions are not there, then doesn't that mean ground troops wouldn't work?
But close air support, CAS, is a very different mission than strategic or operational bombing. Very different mission. One could argue that the only air power that was effective truly in World War II, and most people who did the BDAs of Germany would agree with this, was close air support. By that, you mean the troops on the ground effecting direct contact with the enemy and the air power being used over the heads of the troops to help them kill the enemy. That's the most effective use of air power. Now, the blue suiters don't want to admit that, because that makes them dependent on the ground forces. But that's the truth of all the battle damage assessment of most of our wars. So if you used air power in that regard, you would not necessarily need JDAM kits to put on all the dumb iron bombs you were going to drop. You could drop tons of dumb iron bombs, which we have, and you wouldn't be depleting the inventory, as it were. You would be providing close air support for the troops. It might not be quite as accurate as it would be with PGMs, but it would still be devastating, particularly in the mounts we could put on them. That said, the Iranians are not going to let those jets fly over the heads of those infantry and Marines without trying to shoot some of them down, and they're going to be successful with some of it. At the same time, we don't, and this is the biggest factor, Mario, we don't have the troops. We simply do not have the troops. We have bled our Army and our Marine Corps down to where we used to talk about it. Major regional contingencies is what we called it. One of them for stereotypical purposes, if you will, or for prototype purposes. One of them was Iraq and one of them was North Korea. And Powell would sit there and say, how are we going to do this? We don't have the air bridge to switch between MRCs. Well, that wasn't the only problem we had. The problem we had was we were supposed to defeat decisively the one enemy before we established the air bridge and moved to the other enemy, two MRCs near simultaneously. That was our strategy. Poppycock strategy, and we all knew it, but that's what we put out under Les Aspin. That's the problem. You don't have enough troops to finish off the enemy. You simply don't. And to say you're going to defeat them in 3 months and then transition to another theater is just as stupid as saying you're going to take what we have today and the number of ground forces and defeat what is probably somewhere around 2 million Iranian regulars and another 2 million irregulars. It's just, it doesn't make sense. As we would say in the Cold War, the correlation of forces, using a good Soviet term, is against us.